In the early 70s and around especially 1972, Alana Heiss started mobilizing some artists who were disenchanted with the gallery scene at the time, and they began what came to be known as the alternative space movement. And there were a number of them that popped up at that time, and Alana and some of her friends, Gordon Maddock Clark being a key fellow in that project, in that effort, found a bunch of underused and underutilized and abandoned spaces around the city. Warehouses, they used the underside of the Brooklyn Bridge anchorage, and then they found this tower, and it was pretty much full of garbage. Most of these places were ruins, and they started putting on shows in what was going against at that time the grain of clean white galleries and a straight track trying to get into the museums, and just started showing things, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a week. Sometimes they got an ongoing deal to keep showing stuff there. Sometimes the buildings burnt down, and all sorts of crazy things. This place lasted 40 years. And over the years it became more and more authorized by the city. It's a city building. So they wound up with a lease, or at least an agreement through the Department of Cultural Affairs, to stay here and continued to show. The project grew into what's known as PS1. Went by a few different names, but we know it now as MoMA PS1. It had a residency program where people came from all over the world and occupied some of these little rooms along our hallway. There were group shows in the main space. There were lots of performances. It was a center for experimental music and young composers. There was a lot of political action stuff. The Guerrilla Girls and Collab operated out of here at times, or did shows. And through the ebb and flow of time, it occupied a role that was outside of the marketplace. It is and continues to be a nonprofit entity, and Alana Heiss runs it to this very day, 40 years later. In 2003 and 2004, partially because the building was almost closed down after 9/11. Not closed down, but just locked down. They instituted this incredible security, airport-like security downstairs, and they couldn't really run shows up here anymore. So in the meantime, Alana, who always wanted to have a radio station, and this was the early days of streaming media, created a radio station for PS1, which was called WPS1, and it ran its studios from here. And it got us through those couple of years when we were trying to reconfigure how we operated with the building management and the city and the DCA and all this stuff. And then it continues now as a radio station with thousands of hours of programming, free, on demand, that works in parallel with the website of the gallery, the Clocktower in general. And so it's Art on Air. AIR stood for Art International Radio. For a lot of reasons, the Clocktower was a difficult space to manage and to operate. 9/11 was a killer. We practically shut it down. There were no exhibitions here for almost 4 years. And the board of directors that oversaw it thought, well, it's cost us money. It's hard to, it's expensive to insure. It's a little bit dangerous. We can't really keep an eye on the staff. There's all sorts of reasons to shut it down. Plus, MoMA had acquired, or at least partnered with PS1 to join. And so now MoMA had this 100,000 square foot young artist, emerging artist space, which was their goal, to expand into new audiences. And so they didn't really need a Manhattan Tower down here. They've got a massive, beautiful museum in Midtown. So every 6 months the board would meet and say, well, really, do we need this, really? And Alana did everything she could, and really a heroic effort to just keep it going, because she loved the space so much and it was so important to so many people. I mean, as the director, or one of the directors of this thing for all these years, I was told almost every 6 months, get ready to tell your people they're done. And then somehow, by a miracle, it kept going.
So what's next for you now?
Well, the first stage of what will become the new Clocktower is that we're going to partner with a lot of different cultural groups around the city. Our main center of operation, the radio studios, and the main administrative development and curatorial offices will go to Pioneer Works in Red Hook in Brooklyn. Beautiful, beautiful building, really interesting people, and they've invited us to have what they call an institutional residency for a year or 2 years. So we're going to set up shop in there, and we'll partner with them to do some shows and some performances and a lot of radio. But it's their space, so we'll be sort of the subtenants in a corner of that place. And then we have others. Times Square Arts in Times Square has been helping us find interesting architectural joints to put on performances and exhibitions in Times Square. We started that last summer. There's a wonderful place called the Knockdown Center in Queens, Maspeth. Another massively beautiful old manufacturing space. So that's been an incredible place for special events. We'll do some things there. There's a couple other places too. We recently did something with Silent Barn, and we're about to do something else with Silent Barn. So Silent Barn on the smallest scale, sort of community gritty stuff, and then some bigger productions with these other partners in these giant spaces. And the radio will go on. I mean, what we hope will happen is that, we get a year or two in this transition and we find another tower. In Governor's Island and the Bronx. I mean, in all the boroughs, there's stuff now. There's another generation of very motivated, active, smart, creative people that are making stuff happen, and they just can't do it in Manhattan, so they're doing it out there. When I started doing this work, nobody went to Brooklyn. I mean, maybe they went to BAM or something, and they got off the train and walked 1 block. But now people are fearless about going around town. There's cool stuff in Jersey City. There's a lot of interesting places out there, and people just have to go venture out. It's not like it used to be. They're perfectly happy to, travel to see something.
But when you started too, Manhattan was a totally different place, wasn't it?
Well, when I started, it was, the scary crack era days, and, it could feel dangerous at times, and it really doesn't feel like that anymore. But now then the squeeze from the other side is that the luxury condo market is booming. So there's construction on every corner, and it's all, expensive housing for somebody.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to use space for something creative is smaller and smaller in Manhattan. But Manhattan's cool. It's just that it's a different game now.